that is not overpopulated area, right over south central Palm Beach County, that if there's not a tornado on the ground with this one, it is very, very close. So we have two tornadoes. This one is for Broward, and this one here stretches up into southwestern Palm Beach County, and there are more cells just off the coastline. There's been this training rain that's coming in around Boynton Beach, Highland Beach, and Delray and Gulfstream. And this is the time where I just keep an eye on the Doppler radar. This is why we have Doppler radar. It's not so much for the rain. It is for the detection of tornadoes and for strong wind gusts. And there's one here that this little cell here coming in off the coast that has likely, now this is a loft, 60 to 70 mile an hour winds. The radar beam goes up at an angle, but those winds in these storms come down to the surface sometimes, and 60 to 70 mile an hour winds are going to they'll almost certainly take out some power to homes and could see some damage too. So that is this line of rain that is working in across Boynton and Delray and Boca. The Treasure Coast rain has tapered off a little bit.
Could see
there's
some
a look
damage
at
too.
There's a look
so
at that cell right.
This line of
these are the ones that actually have the tornado warnings from Pompano up into Deerfield and all the way back up into Boca and Delray. And some of our wind speeds in Palm Beach County, it's pretty much been 25, 30, 35 miles an hour. We had reports of a 70 mile an hour wind a couple hours ago in Broward County at the airport, and we've had some strong winds on the Treasure Coast too, and these are moving so fast it doesn't take long to get 30, 40, 50 mile an hour wind gusts, and that brings down some tree branches, and some power lines are possible too. I just want to show you a quick look at the track. We haven't shown it in a while. So there'll be a landfall at Key West,
50 mile an hour wind gusts
just after midnight, and then it works in around the around Fort Myers and Naples tomorrow morning and afternoon, and then almost parallels the west coast of Florida now as a Category 4, and then eventually a 3, and then way up the coastline. Everyone on the peninsula of Florida is going to have an impact from this hurricane. It's either going to be hurricane-force winds, which actually most will feel. Along the east coast, it should be a little bit better with tropical storm winds and maybe hurricane gusts along the immediate coast. This is a big storm. Take it seriously. Computer model tracks will continue to update tonight. There's a look at some of the latest tracks coming in this evening. They're all well west of the lake. That is nice to see. And some of the wind reports on the Treasure Coast, these are from earlier. These are storm reports of 35, 40, 45 miles an hour. This is just the beginning of that. There's a tornado watch for Palm Beach County, likely extended. And there's a new tornado watch right under that banner there for let's see, it is for Palm Beach County and into the just west of the lake. And we're going to see one after another, these tornado warnings, unfortunately, through the overnight. And this watch, which showing up in yellow, will likely be extended into the Treasure Coast. The good thing with the warnings so far is that they're in areas that are away from the coastline, unpopulated areas. So I want to toss it over to James. I think he's got the Doppler radar going there.
Yeah, with the new warnings popping up, this is down in Broward County, but you can clearly see the tornado signature here. This is in Tamarack. This is Cypress Creek and University right here, or thereabouts. And you can see red right here, green right next to it. That is a classic tornado signature that is moving right through northern Broward and western Broward County here. It's about to move out into the Everglades after that, but it's right at or somewhere around that street intersection there in Tamarack. There was already a report of one in Oakland Park by a ham radio operator there, said the tornado was on the ground, and we're seeing a lot of these signatures here. This is what we're looking for, these kind of things. See, it just jumped over the last road there, and it will move out into the Everglades. Now, we're going to see many of these things start to spin on up. In fact, we're seeing a little bit of it up to the north. Let's take this full for a second so I can show you. Up to the north, we're seeing some offshore already. So they'll spin up these things. Let's take this full, though, so I can show you this. They'll spin up these in these little cells, and then they'll come in. And let me just zoom out here real quick. We have a couple of those reaching offshore. So we look, and we can see before they even come on land, we'll be able to see. Here's some strong wind gusts. But notice here that's just quick. Straight line wind. You know, those red right next to the green there. So this is showing the velocity of these squalls that are moving on through. So another Very, very powerful tool for Doppler radar there for sure. And you can see there's that one Steve was talking about, just right there. Wow, just a remarkable signature there. We don't usually see them quite that defined, but you saw that one in the Broward County and kind of drifted up into Palm Beach County too. We're looking at more offshore. Yeah, Steve?
In Sebastian now. If we can go to Live Viper 5 Max, I want to show you that. It's showing some rotation. It's just off the coastline, so let me put some times of arrival in here. The winds along through the airports, Vero and down around St. Lucie County Airport, about 30 to 40 miles an hour. But this cell, which is just off the coast, is showing some rotational off. This one right here, and it is moving about 45 miles an hour toward the beaches. So we may get a warning out of this one. And let me put the storm tracker on it and show you exactly what the times of arrival are for it. It is, like I said, they're moving so quickly. So we're looking at Queens Cove and, of course, along Orchid Island and Johns Island in downtown Vero in the next 10 to 15 minutes because it's moving so quickly.
Yeah, you can definitely see it. Pop up the Max 1 real quick. I have it on the velocities. You can see what we were just talking about right there, the red and green together. Look at that.
It's moving so little quickly there.
Yeah, you can definitely see it. Yeah, let's put this and show you the motion of how it's going. Look at how it just popped up there. So we'll see that. And, you know, potentially that could make its way farther in. It looks like it's moving about in this direction here. So if it holds together, we got to keep an eye on it. We could see a tornado warning pop up here for coastal residents in Indian River County and St. Lucie County.
Yeah, so Fort Pierce, Vero, anyone along the barrier island there. We're going to watch this one for you, and we'll break in and let you know if a warning pops up with that. Either way, it has the chance of popping up some 40, 50 mile an hour wind gusts as it moves on shore. That's a pretty, that's the Doppler winds right there. That's a pretty strong signature on that radar showing an area that has some very strong winds, that red area that's working down. And some of these winds, this is a loft, you know, this is probably 1,000 feet up at least, but some of these winds make it to the surface, and it's areas like that that we have to keep an eye on because they will do damage to buildings.
Staying through tonight and through tomorrow? Is this through the duration?
This peaks. You know, we have another 24 hours of doing this.
Vital to have your safe room in place, as you always advise you. You've been doing this for a long time.
Let's talk about safe rooms because we haven't talked about it a lot. And our winds certainly won't be as strong as the winds on the West Coast, you know, Fort Myers and that area. But we have the tornado threat here. And so you want to look at a room in the lowest level of your house, interior room, bathrooms, underneath staircases are good spots, windowless rooms are nice. And it's sometimes about compromise. So if you have a bathroom that is on an exterior wall that's concrete, you're good to go with that. Or a room that has a small window that is on the exterior, but that's a well-built wall. You can go with that. Sometimes it's, you know, it's not the perfect safe room in the middle of your house that's a bathroom that has concrete walls. Sometimes it's a little give and take sometimes. But you want to know that room because you may have to go into it because this is just starting to fire up now. We've got another 24 hours of this. And we always tell people, have your main supplies in there because we're not telling you to stay in there for the next 24 hours, but if we say so, you'll want to go in and just stay there until some of these warnings subside.
Steve, thanks. To sum up at the top of this hour, a major storm event heading our way with potentially life-threatening tornadoes and other weather. We're going to have major widespread power outages. There's no doubt of that. It's going to be significant disruptions for us for days, perhaps much, much longer, and a catastrophic event on Florida's west coast.
Jay and Shannon will continue our coverage right here on News Channel 5, simulcasting on WFLX. And Michael and I will see you in just a little bit.
Going to stay paralleling the coast over water. Water is what these hurricanes thrive on, what gives them their energy. And with that track, keeping just off the Florida coast from Naples to Fort Myers and up towards Tampa, they could all be experiencing potentially.
All right. right, Ben McMillan for us in Punta Gorda. Again, the storm surge there could be 10 to 15 feet, not just on the coast, but also the rivers and bays. Ben McMillan, thank you so much. CNN's special live coverage continues right now.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Where I'm going first.
For coming into CNN's continuing coverage of Hurricane Irma. You see John Berman in Miami. We are now in Naples, Florida, along the western coast. This path has shifted with the hurricane. We heard about it early this morning. The change has stayed in terms of what the expectation is, that the central to west coast of Florida is now expected to see the worst of Hurricane Irma, from here all the way up to Tampa Bay. Right now, I'm going to give it to John Berman, who is in Miami. I'm going to try to get my communications back. John, I can't hear you, but you can hear me. So tell people the situation down there, and let me try to get reconnected.
All right, Chris, take care of business over there. We're sort of the appetizer for what Chris is going to get over on the west coast of Florida. What he gets on the west, we get here first in Miami. We just got drenched about 20 minutes ago with the strongest rain bands we had felt yet. And now the wind is really blowing stronger than we have seen up until now. Hurricane Irma, a Category 3 storm, but it will get stronger. And it has started to make that northward turn. It passed Cuba. It pounded the north coast of Cuba. Now headed north, the Florida Keys, the next target before turning over the Florida Peninsula and potentially bringing devastating storm surge to some parts of the west coast of Florida, Naples, Fort Myers, all the way up into Tampa. And Miami will not be spared either, even though the eye will not hit here, expecting a storm surge of 3 to 6 feet. Still a lot of concern, still evacuations in place, still curfews that will be starting very shortly in some parts around here. Let's get straight to the CNN Weather Center. Tom Sater is there to give us a sense of just where the storm is now and what we can all expect. And by all, I mean the 20 million people in Florida, Tom, in this storm's path.
Well, I'll tell you what, John, I know everybody wants to know exactly what time landfall is and exactly where. All week long, we have been trying to get the word out. Until Irma makes a turn to the north, we can't do that. I thought by now the system would have made the right turn. Sure, there's a northerly component, but it's west-northwest. I mean, if this continues on a west-northwest track, we may barely get a landfall in Key West. Now, at some point, it will turn northward. And notice the color of red on an infrared satellite imagery, higher, colder cloud tops. Notice how it broadens off that coast. This is getting stronger. This is the first Category 5 to make landfall in Cuba since 1924. Strongest. Now, everybody's talking about Charlie back in Punta Gorda, right? That had maximum winds from the center only out 25 miles. These maximum winds are out 70, and if it gets stronger, it'll go out to about 100, which we had just the other day. I'm a little concerned about Tampa Bay as we get the system north of you, because that's when your storm surge will come in from a north and a westerly track. So that's a big concern. I'm also concerned about Jacksonville because some of the accumulation rates for rainfall put quite a large amount. As you get the bands of rain in here, just like Matthew last year, significant flooding in Jacksonville, I believe that's St. Johns River. So we're going to continue to watch that. Now, I alluded to the fact that once this moves north, John, that the models are all over the place. The good news is, even though it's going to down thousands and thousands of trees, those pine country in the southeast, I think we're going to see the system dry out. So we can move up to the Tennessee Valley and maneuver all at once. If it doesn't have the water source, we're not looking nearly at the type of scenario we had with Harvey stalling in Texas.
All right, Tom Sater for us at the CNN Weather Center. Tom, thanks so much. The message there from Tom, he's concerned about just about everywhere on the Florida Peninsula because one way or the other, nearly every Floridian will be affected, some worse than others. New concern along the West Coast for this enormous storm surge. On the phone with me right now, Florida Governor Rick Scott. Governor Scott, first of all, thank you so much for being with us. Second, I apologize if I sound pretty windy, but the wind is blowing here in Miami. We're standing out here so people get a sense of just how serious it is. What's the most urgent message you want to deliver right now to the people of Florida?
The biggest thing is if you're in the evacuation zone, if you can evacuate, you need to evacuate as fast as you can. We are opening up shelters. We have almost 400 shelters open right now. We're opening up more shelters in every county in the storm's path. But I want everybody to be safe. I want everybody to survive this storm. And so the biggest thing is if you're in an evacuation zone, you've got to get to safety. I'm really concerned about the Keys right now. They're going to have 18 to 15 inches of rain, as you know, and they're going to have unbelievable storm surge. So I know the winds is already impacting them. Southwest Florida with this potential of 15 feet of storm surge. I mean, it's just going to be devastating to our state. But like you said, everybody's going to be impacted in Florida. This is a statewide impact, and then it's a gigantic storm. So, but we're working hard. We have great emergency management people at the state and the local level, great law enforcement. We're doing everything we can to get people into shelters and take care of every citizen in the state.
Governor Scott, we've seen you so many times every day over the course of this week delivering such a consistent message, and it is important to keep on delivering it so people heed the warnings. We have heard from some people on the west coast of Florida. Again, these shelters are open. There is space in them, but in some cases, the public buses to get to these shelters have stopped running. So if you are still at home in one of these cities and you want to get to a shelter, what do?
Well, you call 1-800-342-3557. 1-800-342-3557. That's the state emergency number. We're going to keep we're going to do everything we can to help you evacuate until we can't go anymore because of either the wind or the water or the rain, whatever it is. We'll do everything we can. I know local law enforcement is doing the same thing. We want people to get to safety, but do it as fast as you can, and just every place where you can get to safety, you need to get to safety, whether it's a shelter, a family, or a friend. It's not convenient. It's not like your house. The evacuations are not convenient. It's no fun. But I want everybody to live. I love my family. I know everybody loves their family, and they want to see them all after this storm.
Governor Scott, people can see wind. One of the reasons we stand out here is so people can see the force, so they understand how serious it is. For a lot of people, storm surge is sort of a theoretical concept, not something necessarily they've seen firsthand. And along the West Coast, especially Naples, where I know you're from, and up in Tampa, these are low-lying cities. Tampa, the bay there, that water could come up, and a whole lot of people could be affected. What's the plan?
The plan is we're telling people where we believe the impacted areas are. We have evacuation zones where everybody is doing everything to get these people out of these evacuation zones. We're continuing to monitor this storm as it's moved west, and these storm surge numbers have gone up so fast. And you're right, people don't know what it means, but just stop and think about it. If you had a wall of 15 feet of water just come in so quickly and then pull out so quickly. We had a hurricane last year up in the Panhandle, and there was a lady that we had 6-foot storm surge. She stayed in her house because of her pets. At 3 feet, she knew she wouldn't live, so she finally got out. She only survived because she just happened to have the last high water vehicle was just driving by her house on the way out. If it wasn't for that, she would have passed away. You can't survive these storm surges. You just can't survive them. And so you've got to get out. You've got to evacuate. I know all across the state, we're still trying to get everybody to safety. But this storm's coming. Once the storm's here, we can't evacuate anybody.
Right. The only way to keep yourself safe from storm surge is to get out before there's still time. Last question, Governor Scott, if I can take up one more minute of your time. What do you need right now?
I need everybody to listen and get out. That's the most, from my standpoint, at this point, we've done everything we can to prepare. I need every citizen that's in the evacuation area to say, you know, I love my family. I love my friends. I'm going to go to safety. I'm not going to take a chance of riding this out. There's no fun in riding this out. All this is life-threatening, and I'm not going to do it. And that's what I want everybody to say to themselves and do everything they can to get to safety.
Governor Rick Scott, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for the continuous message you've been giving to the people of Florida to get to safety and take this storm very seriously. It's going to be a long night for the people of Florida, going to be a long night and long day for everyone, including you. So good luck. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
All right, Governor Rick Scott of Florida. We saw him just a few minutes ago briefing. I promise you we will see him again. One of the key things that you need to do as a public figure is keep the people informed. People do have the information of just how dangerous this storm is. It's up to them to listen. I think Chris Cuomo back in Naples, you know, it's hard to get communications out in this type of storm. Chris Cuomo back in Naples has things sorted out. Let's go back to him. Chris?
Well, John, that's the job. I mean, that's why we're here, is to get out the information. We heard from the FEMA director yesterday saying, look, the job of the government is threefold. It's inform, inspire, and then influence, especially before the storm, to get people out. Here in Naples, the governor was discussing a specific concern here. He has a home here, but that's not his concern. It's that it's low-lying, it's spongy, it can't take a lot of water, and it expects a lot of storm surge. We've had a couple of cells come through here, squalls, nothing the likes of which may come when Hurricane Irma is here in earnest sometime tomorrow afternoon, and the streets flood very easily. It pools quickly, and that lets you know that it just doesn't have a lot of threshold for water, and that means things are going to flood very easily. The number one killer in a hurricane is not the wind. I know intuitively you think it is, but it's drowning. And that storm surge is the number one component of that. That's why the governor keeps telling this story about an elderly woman who only survived because she got lucky. And that is a very important story, because you have to make a decision. Is it worth taking a chance with your life just to make sure you get and stay home more and get back into the business of recovering sooner? Because that's the proposition for a lot of the people that we are showing you on television who say, I'll be okay, I'll stick it out. I don't think it's going to be as bad. I've been here before. You're taking a chance with your life if you're in an area of acute concern. That's something for you to think about. Now, the governor, when he was giving his details, the big numbers, 70,000 are currently in shelters. They still need nurses to help with the elderly and the infirm. He said the need was 1,000. It's now less because so many of you who have those skills have stepped up, and thank you for that. When we've seen people stepping up to help one another, it is one of the most beautiful and essential components of recovery. He said they are expecting up to 2 feet of rain in the Keys. So let's get to Bill Weir. He's down there. Bill, two things spoke to your situation. One, the governor was worried about the amount of water you're going to see there, the amount of rain. And two, he hates seeing the people who say, I can stick this out. I know better than those who are telling me to go. You've been experiencing that firsthand.
Absolutely. We've seen prime examples of both of those, Chris. We've actually moved our location over to the Biscayne Bayside. Rod, why don't you give them a shot of where we are? We're kind of huddled under a fish cleaning tiki hut there, but this will be the dirty side of the storm. Will maybe come up on this side. We're seeing, you know, it's sort of the battle of the bands. One comes and then it eases, and the next one comes stronger and more vengeance. But we're in this a little bit of a hurricane hole, as sailors would call it, surrounded by mangrove swamps. This harbor is thankfully quiet, other than a few car alarms that have been touched off by the wind, which adds an even more eerie soundtrack to this whole scene here. But we were at another big marine, Curtis Marine, on the other ocean side of Key Largo. And take a look at this video. You see the strangest things when you're hanging around boat harbors in the Florida Keys. These are hardy folks. The woman in the kayak, her name is Carol. They call her the queen of that marina. She's been sailing all her life. Her boat, the Thither to Yon, she tells me, was the only boat to survive Hurricane Andrew back in 1992. For some people, that'd be a sign to get out of sailing, but obviously it hasn't stopped her. And she took a steak knife, put it between her teeth, paddled out to tighten the mooring lines on the boat next to her so it wouldn't bash into her boat. These are folks, about 5 different families that are riding out the storm. They do have a concrete shelter right next to that marina right there with, you know, steel shutters, so they feel pretty safe there. But there's just, you know, the governor can say it until he turns blue. Unfortunately, there's a population in the Keys that is never going to evacuate. Like, retreat is just not in their vocabulary, and all you can do is cross your fingers for them and hope Irma spares them, and ultimately that they can maybe pay it back and use those boats to aid others once this thing blows past. Chris?
You know, Bill, we were talking yesterday how a conch, you know, in Italian, that the word for that is scungili, and that term that people use when someone's not thinking quite right. You know, a little bit of this is tongue-in-cheek, and a little bit of it is deadly serious. The governor doesn't like hearing these stories of these people for a reason. We need to be there. Bill Weir is doing excellent work letting you know what's happening on the ground there, and actually it's helping the first responders and the government officials as well to assess the risk they'll have to deal with afterwards. So, Bill, thanks to you. Stay as safe as you can. We'll check back with you in a little bit. But remember why the governor doesn't like it. Of course, we prize rugged individualism in the United States. It's a signature trait of Americans. But not in this situation, because you are putting others at risk. The first responders, who in this case, down here in South Florida, they have an amazing team. We spend time with them. We know they're prepared. We know they are uniquely capable, and some 500 strong men and women are tasked with being here for the rest of us. But they've left their own families, and many of them are in jeopardy, to help save as many as they can. Why tax them any more than necessary? Why create risk? Why take a chance if you didn't need to? That's the assessment the governor wants everybody to make, and he wants them to err on the side of caution. This is a concern that has been specific to where Kyung La is. She's in Miami Beach, another spongy place, another place that's expecting storm surge, another place that has struggled with getting the mandatory evacuation orders heeded. Kyung, what have you seen in the last couple of hours since we last checked in?
You know, there's still people walking about, Chris, and it's really astonishing considering that this place has been under a mandatory evacuation order for a couple of days now. And we're hearing some very strong words from the city to make sure that people heed it. In about 45 minutes, a curfew goes into effect, and the police have said that if you are out and about, you are subject to arrest. Now, I can say, to be completely fair, that this is South Beach, and it does look like many people in this astonishingly normally busy place. You can see it's completely boarded up. This part of it is completely empty. There aren't any people out. This is surprising for South Beach, so it does appear that some people are, you know, trying to heed the mandatory evacuation order. There's even a little bit of art here. But one thing that the fire department wants to make sure, and the city wants to make sure that people understand, is that with the track changing, with the forecast showing that it's heading all west, they do not want people to become overconfident and think that they can come back to Miami Beach. Here's what we heard from the city. Are you concerned that with the latest weather forecast, people will say, we're done, we're coming back?
And we hope not. We want them to stay safe, stay inside, because this is still a highly, highly serious situation and dangerous.
And they don't want people to come back. What they want to see is this. They want it to be completely empty. And we did see police officers who are out and about, so they are absolutely, Chris, planning on enforcing that curfew rule and talking to people and making sure that they get inside if they have not heeded that mandatory evacuation order. So one other thing I want to point out, Chris, if you could walk with me this way, you can see over here, the lights are still working. We actually have power here. There have been a number of places that have lost power in Miami, but here in Miami Beach, we have not. There's a guy on his bicycle. Hopefully he knows that at 8 o'clock that he is going to be subject to arrest. Chris?
Now, Kyung, there had been reports that about 35,000 were already without power in Miami-Dade, in that catchment area. And, you know, that's a frightening suggestion because the storm isn't even here yet. They're expecting as many as 1 million people could be left without power, and not just for hours, but for days, maybe even longer. That is the word from the government officials tasked with monitoring the situation. Again, Governor Scott, in no uncertain terms, said if you are in a low-lying or an evacuation area where it's mandatory, heed the warning if you can. And if not, please have a plan and have the supplies you need to go as long as 3 days without any help. That's how long it could take. We're going to take a break right now. When we come back, we're going to go and speak with one of the people who has made this decision. They can tough it out. They'll be okay. They happen to be in Key West, one of the most vulnerable part of the Keys, which is the most vulnerable part of Florida. Please stay safe. Heed the calls to evacuate if you can, and stay with CNN if you're going to be watching the coverage.
Outbreak possibility on the East Coast. We'll have the surge, of course, continuing up the East Coast. On the West Coast, winds will Coast. On the West Coast, winds will be out of the north somewhat, northeasterly. Coast. On the West Coast, winds will be out of the north somewhat, northeasterly.
Like it's going to parallel the coast, which means more places are going to see that storm surge. and you just have a really dangerous situation that's going to be unfolding over the next 12 to 24 hours.
So right now, for the folks in Florida, who are most at risk at this hour?
So I would say from Tampa down to Naples, that is where you are at most at risk. If you're on the eastern side of the state, you're absolutely going to have storm surge. They've already got a foot in Miami. You're absolutely going to have at least hurricane force winds. But you can see in this storm surge map that greater than 9, that graphic we built a couple of hours ago, that's now like 10 to 15 if you're in that red area.
Wow, so the red area is now 10 to 15 feet.
Correct. So these numbers keep going up. We're running out of sort of colors on their charts that they automated.
Yeah.
They make in an automated fashion. So it is absolute worst case scenario for Southwest Florida. For Southeast Florida, you're still on the right side of the storm. You still get tornadoes. You still get hurricane force winds, and I think we have that on O if they can throw that one up. And you can see just the bands of winds that we have for folks. You're looking at least Category 1 strength in much of Central Florida. You're looking at least Category 2 in the Tampa area. So that's winds over 110 miles an hour. You're looking at some really serious winds that are just starting to pick up now and will continue to get worse.
We talk about Category 4s, Category 5s, but when you talk about Category 2, it's still really dangerous.
Right, and people are like, oh, I can ride out a Category 2.
Yeah.
Category 2 is no big deal. And yes, your odds are better, but again, this comes down to a simple, why would you take the chance? Yeah. You know, what value do you place on your life? Like, put aside your pride and realize that these storms kill people because not because we didn't forecast them right, not because people didn't know what was coming, but because they chose to think they were stronger than the storm.
As you said earlier, you can't ride out storm surge.
No.
Oh, if we could put back on the map, this isn't all we're concerned about, Irma. We've got Jose and Katya. What are they?
Elderly people should make sure that they've evacuated, but certainly knowing a basic first aid or having someone in their immediate family that is there that knows some immediate first aid is very important.
And if you've made the decision to stay at home, don't move now.
Don't move now. That time for movement, especially down in the Keys, is over with. The time for movement, certainly out of the Miami area, is pretty much over. You should be in a shelter. Get to a shelter now.
I wanted to be clear. The Governor Rick Scott made clear that if you're further up on the West Coast in Naples or Fort Myers, there still is time to move. I meant once it gets to be dark, once the winds get north of 40 miles an hour, that's the time to stay as safe as you can at home. David, one of the big concerns, storm surge. And here in Miami, we're looking at a storm surge of 3 to 6 feet, which would bring the water up, to our knees or higher right now. On the west coast of Florida, they're talking 10 to 15 feet. That is a serious concern.
I think Governor Scott said it best. That is something that is almost unimaginable. You can't even imagine people surviving that kind of storm surge. Over on the West Coast, unlike here, it is the ground is typically saturated already. It doesn't hold a lot of water when it rains. So a storm surge of 10 to 15 feet is just unimaginable, and it's going to travel inland a long ways.
So it was your job when you were Director of Emergency Management to plan for that. Look, I should also acknowledge it is now that it has yet. It was your job to plan for worst case scenario, and I imagine a storm surge of 10 to 15 feet would be something like the worst case scenario there. So how do you deal with that?
Well, the locals have a solid plan. Certainly Collier County, where Naples is at, Lee County, where Fort Myers is at, they know where to move their people. We did a regional evacuation study.
Thank you for watching.